the fashion industry evolving from the 1920s to the 1950s.
In the aftermath of World War I, changes were occurring in America for women. The 1920s was just the beginning of a new era.
This new era included the jobs women began taking on, the rights to vote, and their freedom to become fashion icons. Fashion had evolved tremendously from the 1920s to the 1950s.
In the early 1920s, flapper girls became very popular. They shocked society by cutting their hair, raising their hemlines, wearing makeup, and their scandalous dancing in the club scene.
Low-waisted dresses with a fullness at the hemline allowed women to pick up their heels literally in new dances like the Charleston.
Younger women now made sportswear into the greatest change in post-war fashion. The tubular dresses of the teens had evolved into a similar silhouette that now sported shorter skirts with pleats, gathers, or slits to allow motion to rule women's fashion for the first time in history. Coco Chanel was a major figure in fashion at the time, as much for her magnetic personality to her chic and progressive designs.
Chanel helped popularize the bob hairstyle, the little black dress, and the use of jersey knit for women's clothing. She also helped elevate the status of both costume jewelry and knitwear.
In the 1930s, as the public began to feel the effects of the Great Depression, many designers found that crises are not the time for experimentation. Overall, the 1930s clothing was somber and modest, reflecting the difficult social and economic situation of the decade.
Fashion became all about elegance and sophistication. The female body was remodeled to a more classical shape, and slim, toned, and athletic bodies came into vogue. The fashion for outdoor activities stimulated designers to manufacture what would nowadays be called sportswear.
One of the most prominent and influential fashion designers of the 1930s was Madeleine Vionnet. She found her inspiration in ancient statues, creating timeless and beautiful gowns. She also produced evening dresses that fitted the body without excessive elaboration, employing a flowing and elegant line.
Fashion had its place even in wartime. Some Paris fashion trends were followed in the United States, but travel difficulties meant that many American designers received more attention from the press than ever.
In the 1940s, hats were often made of scraps of material that would have otherwise been thrown away, sometimes incorporating bits of paper and wood shavings. Fashion took second place in providing basic necessities to the men and women in the armed forces. Many factories were given over to producing military supplies. The remaining fashion houses worked with restrictions on how much fabric could be used in any garment.
A well-known designer in the 1940s was Christian Dior. Christian Dior created a tidal wave with his first collection in February 1947. The collection contained dresses with tiny waists, majestic busts, and full skirts.
Ready-to-wear fashion had become very important, and American designers had begun to take a more prominent place in the world of fashion.
Women's clothes were seldom prettier and more generally wearable in the 1950s.
Despite the fact that women had the right to vote, to work, and to drive their own cars, they chose to wear dresses made of opulent materials with corseted waists and swirling skirts to mid-calf.
Designers of Hollywood created a particular type of glamour for the stars of American film. Outfits worn by the likes of Marilyn Monroe were widely copied.
The most influential and respected designers of Hollywood from the 1930s to the 1950s were Edith Head, Jean Lewis, and Travis Bianco.
Everyday women's clothing during the decade consists of long coats, hats with small veils, leather gloves, and knee-length dresses combined with pearl necklaces.
Clothing changed with women's changing roles in modern society. There was a revolution in almost every sphere of human activity, and fashion was no exception.